The widow's rifle cracked through the morning air, and the tin can flew off the fence post before the echo had even finished rolling across the Montana Valley, announcing to anyone within earshot that Davina Wellesley had no intention of being easy prey for any man with matrimonial ideas. It was late spring in 1878, and the small settlement of Ukiah, Montana Territory, had grown accustomed to the sound of her daily target practice. The townsfolk had also grown accustomed to watching a steady parade of suitors approach her modest ranch on the outskirts of town, only to return looking dejected, confused, or downright angry. Some said she was too proud. Others whispered she was damaged by grief. A few believed she simply enjoyed breaking hearts as sport. None of them were right, but none of them had bothered to ask. Davina lowered the rifle and squinted at the fence line, already reaching for another round. At 26, she had been a widow for 3 years, ever since Thomas Wellesley took a fever that no amount of prayer or medicine could break. They had been married only 18 months, barely enough time to learn each other's habits, let alone build the kind of love that poets wrote about. He had been kind enough, hardworking, and decent. His death had been tragic and left her with this 100-acre ranch, a sturdy cabin, 20 head of cattle, and a bank account that would last maybe 2 more years if she was careful. What it had not left her with was any desire to rush into another arrangement just because society deemed it proper. She loaded another round and fired. Another can went flying. "Nice shooting," a voice called from behind her. Davina spun, rifle instinctively coming up to her shoulder, finger off the trigger but ready. A man sat astride a paint horse about 30 yards back, hands raised in a gesture of peace. He wore the dusty clothes of a working cowboy, his hat tilted back enough that she could see sun-weathered features and eyes that held no malice. "I announced myself twice while riding up the path," he said calmly. "You were focused on your shooting." She lowered the rifle slightly but kept it ready. "State your business." "Name is Quentin Tanner. I heard in town you might be hiring for ranch work. I have experience with cattle, horses, mending fences, and most other tasks that need doing on a spread this size." Davina studied him. He was probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and a lean build that spoke of hard work rather than hardship. His saddle was well maintained, his horse healthy, and his manner respectful without being obsequious. She had indeed mentioned to the general store owner last week that she needed help, particularly with the spring roundup and branding. "I heard that position filled yesterday," she lied, testing him. "No, you did not," he replied evenly. "Because I just came from talking to Harold Simmons at the store, and he said you turned down the 3 men who applied. Said you did not give a reason, just sent them on their way. Maybe I did not like them, maybe, or maybe they came with other expectations besides honest work." Davina felt her jaw tighten. He was not wrong. 2 of the men had made it clear they saw ranch work as merely a prelude to courtship. The third had been old enough to be her father and had spent the entire conversation staring at her in a way that made her skin crawl. "And you have no such expectations?" she asked. "I expect fair wages for fair work. You need help running this place and I need employment." Seems straightforward enough. She wanted to send him away like the others to maintain her fortress of solitude, but the truth was, she did need help. The cattle were scattered across the rangeland, and she could not manage the roundup alone. The north fence line had 3 breaks she knew about and probably more she had not found. The roof needed patching before the summer storms came. $20 a month, meals included, and you sleep in the bunkhouse, she said. You work dawn to dusk 6 days a week. Sunday afternoons are your own after morning chores. You step out of line once you are gone. That is fair. When do I start? Now. Put your horse in the corral and meet me at the barn. We have fence line to check before noon." Quentin dismounted and led his horse toward the corral without another word. Davina watched him go, already second-guessing her decision. But she had made it clear this was business, nothing more. He seemed to understand that. She hoped he did anyway. The morning passed in relative silence as they rode the northern boundary of her property. Quentin proved competent, spotting 2 fence breaks she had missed and making mental notes of what materials they would need for repairs. He did not try to make conversation beyond what the work required, and he did not stare at her the way so many men did, as though trying to see through her walls by sheer force of will. By the time they returned to the ranch for the midday meal, Davina found herself slightly less tense than she had been in weeks. She had prepared a simple stew the night before, and they ate in the kitchen without ceremony. Quentin complimented the food, asked where she wanted to focus efforts in the afternoon, and never once asked personal questions or made suggestive comments. It was refreshing and deeply unsettling in equal measure. "We should start the roundup tomorrow," she said, pushing her empty bowl aside. "I have been putting it off too long already. How many head are we talking about? Started with 20 after Thomas died. Should be close to 30 by now with the calves. That is manageable with 2 people if the terrain is not too rough. It is Montana. The terrain is always rough." He smiled slightly at that. "Fair point. We will manage." Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm. Quentin proved to be exactly what he had claimed, a capable ranch hand who knew his business and did not need constant supervision. He was up before dawn, worked hard all day, and spent his evenings in the bunkhouse reading books he had brought in his saddlebag. He never presumed to enter her cabin uninvited, never made her uncomfortable, and never once brought up her status as a widow or the parade of suitors she had rejected. The roundup went smoother than she had dared hope. They located all but 2 of the cattle, including a cow that had wandered nearly 5 miles south and gotten herself tangled in brush. Quentin freed her with patience and skill, taking a kick to the shoulder without complaint. "You should put ice on that," Davina said when they got back to the ranch. "I've had worse." "That is not the point. Injury ignored becomes injury worsened." He looked at her with something that might have been amusement. "Yes, madam." She fetched ice from the springhouse, wrapped it in cloth, and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and she pulled back as though burned. He did not seem to notice, just pressed the ice to his shoulder and thanked her. That night, lying in her bed alone as she had for 3 years, Davina found herself thinking about that brief touch. It had been so long since she had felt anything resembling attraction, so long since she had wanted to. Thomas had been a business arrangement that grew into fondness, but there had never been passion, never been that spark people talked about. She did not want to feel it now. Did not want the complication, but her treacherous body did not seem to care what her mind wanted. The next morning, Jeremiah Foster rode up to the ranch just as they were preparing to head out for branding. Jeremiah owned the largest spread in the county, had buried 2 wives, and had been one of her most persistent suitors over the past year. "Mrs. Wellesley," he said, tipping his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "I heard you finally took on a ranch hand." "News travels fast," she replied coolly. "Small town, people talk." His eyes slid to Quentin with barely concealed hostility. "I want you to know my offer still stands. You marry me, and you will never have to worry about hiring help again. You will have everything you need." "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Foster, but my answer has not changed. You are being unreasonable. A woman alone cannot run a ranch indefinitely. You need a husband, whether you want to admit it or not. What I need is to get to work, if you will excuse me." "This is foolishness, Davina. You are letting pride ruin your future." Quentin had been silent until now, standing by his horse and checking the cinch on his saddle. But at Jeremiah's tone, he turned. "The lady has given her answer. Seems like the respectful thing would be to accept it." Jeremiah's face flushed red. "I was not talking to you, Drifter." "No, you were talking at her. There is a difference. You have been here 1 week, and you think you have a say in her affairs. I think I can recognize when someone is not listening. You might want to work on that." For a moment, Davina thought Jeremiah might climb down from his horse and start a fight. Instead, he turned his glare back to her. "When this arrangement fails and you come asking for help, do not expect me to be so generous with my offer." He wheeled his horse around and rode off at a gallop, leaving dust and tension in his wake. Davina turned to Quentin. "You did not need to do that." "Probably not. But I do not care much for men who cannot take no for an answer. He is powerful in this county. Making an enemy of him could cause problems, for you or for me." "Both, potentially." Quentin shrugged. "Then we will deal with problems if they come. For now, we have cattle to brand." They worked side by side all day, and Davina found herself acutely aware of him in ways she had not been before. The way he moved, efficient and confident. The way he spoke to the cattle, low and calming. The way he wiped sweat from his brow with his forearm, leaving a streak of dust across his temple. She forced herself to focus on the work. That evening, as they cleaned up at the pump behind the barn, she finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Why did you really come here, Quentin?" He looked up from washing his hands. "I told you I needed work. There are dozens of ranches between here and Colorado. Why mine?" He was quiet for a long moment, water dripping from his fingers. "I heard about you in town before I rode out here. Heard you were a widow who refused every offer of marriage, who preferred to struggle alone rather than accept help. People said it like it was a character flaw. And you thought that made me an easy employer. I thought it made you someone who knew her own mind. That is rare enough in anyone, man or woman. Seemed like the kind of person I would not mind working for." It was not the answer she expected, and she did not quite know what to do with it. Over the following weeks, Jeremiah Foster proved to be a man who kept grudges. Twice, Davina went to purchase supplies in town only to find prices mysteriously raised on items she needed. The blacksmith apologized and said he had gotten instructions from his landlord, Jeremiah, about extending credit. The man who had bought her excess grain last year suddenly had no need for it this season. It was petty revenge, but it was effective. Her finances had been tight before. Now they were approaching critical. "I can work for half wages until things improve," Quentin offered when she finally admitted the situation to him. "Absolutely not. You earn your pay honestly. This is not your burden to bear. It became my burden when I made an enemy of Foster on your behalf. You were defending common decency. I will not punish you for that." But the situation weighed on her. She lay awake at night doing calculations in her head, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. The ranch could support them both if she could just get through to next year when she could sell cattle. But if she could not buy feed for the winter, if she could not afford to have the equipment repaired, if she could not pay for a dozen other necessities, she might have to accept one of the proposals after all. The thought made her feel sick. On Sunday afternoon, when the chores were done and Quentin had the time to himself, she found him sitting by the creek that ran through her property. He had a fishing line in the water and a book open in his lap. "May I join you?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "Of course." She sat on the bank a few feet away, drawing her knees up and wrapping her arms around them. For a while, neither spoke. The water burbled over rocks, and somewhere a bird called its evening song. "They all want to know why I refuse to remarry," she said finally. "Everyone in town has a theory." But no one has ever asked me directly. Quentin set his book aside. Why do you refuse? Because every man who has asked has told me what he can provide, what he can give me, what I will have if I accept. Not one has asked what I want. Not one has considered that I might have my own dreams, my own plans, my own vision for my future. What do you want? He asked simply. The question hung in the air between them, and Davina felt something crack open in her chest. Tears burned behind her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. I want this ranch, she said, her voice rough with emotion. I want to build something that is mine, not inherited, not given by a husband, but earned through my own work. I want to prove that I can do this. I want to wake up every morning knowing that every choice, every success, every failure is my own. I want to matter beyond being someone's wife or mother or possession. Those are good wants, Quentin said quietly. They are selfish wants. Impractical. The whole town thinks I am a fool. The whole town is wrong. She looked at him then, really looked at him. His eyes held no judgment, no pity, no calculation, just understanding. Why do you care? She whispered. Because I spent the first 20 years of my life being told what I should want. My father had my whole life planned. Take over the family business, marry the girl he chose, raise children to continue the legacy. I tried. God, I tried to want what he wanted, but it felt like slowly suffocating. So you left, so I left. Broke my father's heart, disappointed my mother, became the shame of the family. But I could finally breathe. He paused. When I heard about you, about a woman who would rather struggle than give up her autonomy, I recognized something. Someone fighting for the same thing I fought for. The right to choose your own path. Exactly. They sat in the fading light, and something shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two people who had chosen difficult freedom over easy captivity. I cannot afford to keep paying you, Davina said. Not with Foster sabotaging me at every turn. You should start looking for other work. No, Quentin, no, he repeated firmly. We will figure this out, together. Why would you do that? He met her eyes steadily. Because your dream deserves a fighting chance. And because I would like to be part of building something that matters, if you will let me. Her heart hammered in her chest. This was dangerous territory. This was vulnerability she had not allowed herself in years. Partners, she asked. Equal share in the work and the decisions. Partners, he agreed. They shook hands on it, and this time when their skin touched, neither pulled away. The next week brought a new suitor to her door, and this one was worse than all the rest. Silas Crawford owned the bank in Ukiah and held mortgages on half the properties in the county. He arrived in a fancy buggy wearing a suit that cost more than most families made in 6 months. Mrs. Wellesley, he said, his smile showing too many teeth. I have come to discuss your financial situation. Davina's blood ran cold. I am not behind on any payments. Not yet. But I have heard about your difficulties with suppliers. I have reviewed your account. At your current rate of expenditure versus income, you will be unable to make your payment in 3 months. That is my concern, not yours. Actually, as the holder of your mortgage, it very much is my concern. Which is why I am here with a solution. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Marry me, and I will forgive the entire mortgage. The ranch will be yours, free and clear. You will never have to worry about money again. The ranch is mine already. Only until you cannot make a payment. Then it becomes the bank's property, which is to say my property. This way, everyone benefits. Quentin appeared from the barn, leading his horse. He had clearly been saddling up to ride fence line, but he stopped when he saw the buggy. Is there a problem here? He asked. No problem, Silas said smoothly. Just making a business proposal to the lady. Sounds more like a threat to me. I beg your pardon, marry me or lose everything. That is a threat, not a proposal. Silas's smile vanished. "You are the ranch hand, I believe. This does not concern you." "It concerns me if you are trying to take advantage of my employer. Your employer is in a precarious position through her own stubbornness. I am offering her a way out. You are offering to profit from her difficulties. There is a difference." Davina found her voice. "Mr. Crawford, I appreciate your offer, but I must decline. I will make my mortgage payments as agreed." "You are making a mistake," Silas said, his veneer of civility cracking. "I have been patient with you, more patient than most men would be, but my patience has limits." "Is that another threat?" Quentin asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "It is a statement of fact. 3 months, Mrs. Wellesley. That is all the time you have left." Silas climbed back into his buggy and snapped the reins, leaving them standing in his dust. Davina felt her knees go weak. 3 months. She had known things were tight, but she had not realized how tight. She sank down onto the porch steps, her head in her hands. Quentin tied his horse back up and sat beside her. He did not touch her, did not offer empty platitudes. He just sat with her in her moment of despair. "I cannot do this," she whispered. "I have been so stubborn, so determined to prove I could make it alone, and all I have done is put everything at risk." "You have not been stubborn, you have been brave. Brave and broke is still broke. Then we find another way. We sell cattle early. We take on extra work. There is no extra work. Foster has made sure of that. And if we sell cattle now before they have fattened on summer grass, we will get half what they are worth. It is not enough." Quentin was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I have some money saved." "Not a lot, but no." She looked at him fiercely. "I will not take your savings. You have already given up wages to help me. I will not ask for more." "You are not asking, I am offering." "Why?" She grabbed his arm, needing him to hear her. "Why would you give up everything for a woman you barely know, for a ranch that is not yours, for a future that might not even exist in 3 months?" He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. "Because somewhere along the way, it stopped being just a job. Because when I look at this place, I see what it could become. Because when I look at you," he stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "Because I believe in what you are trying to build here, and because I want to be part of it." "Quentin, I am not asking for anything in return," he said quickly. "I am not proposing marriage or expecting gratitude, or trying to manipulate you into feeling obligated. I am just offering help as a partner, as a friend, as someone who cares about seeing you succeed." She wanted to refuse. Wanted to maintain her independence, her pride, her wall against vulnerability. But the truth was, she needed help. And more than that, she wanted his help. Wanted him to stay. Wanted to keep building this fragile, honest thing they had started to create together. "We would need to draw up papers," she said finally. "Legal partnership. Equal stake in the ranch's future. If I am taking your money, you deserve to share in the success if we make it. Davina, those are my terms. Equal partners or nothing." He searched her face, then slowly nodded. "Equal partners." They rode into town together the next day to see the lawyer. The same lawyer who had helped draft her husband's will now drew up partnership papers that gave Quentin a 40% stake in the ranch in exchange for his investment and labor. Davina kept the majority share, but it was much closer to equal than anyone expected. The news spread through Ukiah like wildfire. By evening, half the town was gossiping about the widow and her cowboy. Some said it was scandalous. Others predicted it would end in disaster. A few understanding souls thought it was the smartest thing Davina had done since her husband died. Jeremiah Foster showed up 3 days later, and he was not alone. He brought the sheriff with him. "Mrs. Wellesley," Sheriff Donovan said, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Foster has some concerns about your new business arrangement." "What concerns could he possibly have about my private business?" He believes this man might be taking advantage of you, coercing you into signing over part of your property. Davina felt rage rise in her chest. That is absurd. Is it? Jeremiah stepped forward. You refused every legitimate offer of help, then suddenly you hand over nearly half your ranch to a drifter you have known for less than 2 months. It does not add up. What does not add up is your sudden concern for my welfare when you have spent the past month sabotaging my business. I have done no such thing. You have pressured suppliers to raise my prices and blacklisted me from buyers. Do not pretend innocence, Jeremiah. The sheriff looked between them. Is this true, Foster? I may have mentioned to a few associates that I would not do business with anyone who dealt with Mrs. Wellesley. That is my right. That is manipulation, Quentin said coldly. That is business, something a drifter would not understand. I understand that you cannot accept a woman's right to refuse you, so you are trying to destroy her to soothe your wounded pride. Jeremiah's hand went to his hip where a pistol hung. Quentin did not move, did not flinch, just stared him down with steady eyes. Enough, the sheriff said sharply. Foster, if you have a legal complaint about the partnership agreement, take it to a judge. Otherwise, leave these people to their business. And both of you, keep your hands away from your weapons or I will throw you both in a cell. This is not over, Jeremiah said to Davina. You are making enemies you cannot afford. The only enemy I see is the one you are choosing to be. After they left, Davina sank into a chair, shaking with adrenaline and anger. Quentin poured her a glass of water and waited while she drank it. This is going to get worse before it gets better, she said, probably. You could still walk away, take back your investment, find work somewhere that is not in the middle of a war. I could, he agreed, but I am not going to. She looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice. Why are you really doing this, Quentin? The truth this time. He pulled a chair over and sat facing her, close enough that their knees almost touched. The truth is that I spent 6 years drifting from place to place, working jobs that did not matter, building nothing, connecting with no one. I was free, but I was also alone. Empty. Then I came here, and for the first time since I left home, I felt like I was part of something meaningful. Like I was building something that would last. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he took her hand in both of his. The truth is that somewhere between fixing fences and branding cattle and arguing with stubborn ranchers, I started to care. About the ranch, about the future, about you. And I know that is not part of our partnership agreement. I know you are not looking for that kind of complication. But you asked for honesty, and that is mine. Davina's heart raced. She should pull her hand away. Should remind him of the professional boundaries they had established. Should protect herself from the vulnerability of caring. Instead, she squeezed his hand back. I care too, she whispered. And it terrifies me. Because of Thomas. Because of what happens if this does not work. If we lose the ranch, if the partnership fails, if she could not finish the sentence. If we fall in love and it goes wrong, he finished gently. Yes. Those are all real risks. I cannot promise you it will work out. I cannot even promise we will save the ranch, though God knows I will give everything I have trying. But I can promise that I will be honest with you, that I will respect your choices, that I will never try to control you or own you or diminish your dreams. That is more than most men would promise. You deserve more than most men would offer. She wanted to kiss him, wanted to close the distance between them and let herself feel everything she had been holding back, but fear held her frozen. I am not ready, she said. I want to be, but I am not. That is all right. I will be here when you are. They sat like that for a long while, hands linked, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging between them like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The next month was brutal. They worked from dawn until well after dark, pushing themselves to prepare for an early cattle sale. If they could get the herd to market before the usual time, they might find buyers who were not under Foster's influence. It was a gamble, but it was the only move they had. The physical labor was exhausting, but it was nothing compared to the emotional toll. Every day, Davina felt herself falling deeper for Quentin. The way he sang quietly while he worked. The way he left wildflowers on the kitchen table without comment. The way he seemed to know when she needed silence and when she needed conversation. He never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel obligated to return his feelings. But they were there between them, growing stronger every day. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple, he said, "Tell me about your dreams, the real ones, not just keeping the ranch, but what you want to do with it." She had never told anyone the full vision. It seemed too grand, too unlikely. But with Quentin, she felt safe to speak it aloud. "I want to build something that lasts," she said. "Not just a ranch, but a legacy. I want to breed quality cattle that other ranchers will seek out. I want to be known for having the best stock in Montana. I want young women who are told they cannot run a business to look at what I have built and know it is possible." That is a good dream. It is an ambitious dream, maybe too ambitious. Ambition is only too much if you are not willing to work for it. You are willing, so it is exactly the right amount. She smiled despite herself. "You always know the right thing to say. Not always, but I try." A comfortable silence fell between them. Then Davina said, "Tell me about your father, about why you really left." Quentin was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "My father owns a shipping company in Boston, very successful, very respected. He had my whole life planned before I was old enough to have an opinion. I would learn the business, marry the daughter of another shipping magnate, produce an heir to continue the dynasty. But you did not want that. I tried to want it, spent years trying, but every day felt like wearing clothes that did not fit. Too tight, too constraining. I could not breathe. And then I met someone who made me realize just how much I was suffocating. A woman, a rancher who came to Boston on business. He talked about wide, open spaces, about working with his hands, about building something from nothing. He made it sound like freedom, like possibility. I found myself dreaming about it constantly. So you left. So I left. Walked away from everything my father had built, every expectation, every comfort. Broke my mother's heart in the process. I have not spoken to either of them in 7 years. Davina heard the pain in his voice. "Do you regret it?" "I regret hurting them, but I do not regret choosing my own path. Even when that path has been hard, even when I have struggled, it has been my struggle, my choice. That matters." "Yes," she said softly. "It does." She understood him now in a way she had not before. Understood why her fight for autonomy resonated with him. They were both people who had chosen difficult freedom over easy captivity. "You think you will ever reconcile with them?" she asked. "Maybe. If I can show them that my choice was not a rejection of them, but an affirmation of myself. If I can build something they can respect, even if it is not what they wanted." He glanced at her. "This ranch could be that if we save it, if we make it thrive. That is a lot of pressure to put on a few cows and some land. Maybe, but it is pressure I am willing to carry." She reached over and took his hand. It was becoming easier each time, this small intimacy. "Thank you for trusting me with that story. Thank you for asking." The cattle drive to market was scheduled for the first week of June. They would take the herd to the railhead in Helena, about 70 miles northwest. It would be a hard journey, especially with just the two of them, but they had no choice. The night before they left, Davina could not sleep. She lay in her bed listening to the sounds of the ranch, memorizing them in case this was the last time she would hear them from inside her own home. If the sale went poorly, if Foster managed to sabotage them, even in Helena, they would lose everything. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and went outside. To her surprise, Quentin was sitting on the porch steps, his own insomnia apparently matching hers. "Could not rest either?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Too much riding on tomorrow." "Tomorrow and all the tomorrows after," he nodded. They sat in the darkness, their shoulders just touching, drawing comfort from each other's presence. "Quentin," she said quietly, "if this does not work, if we lose everything, we will face it together. You could lose your entire investment, all your savings. Money is just money. It comes and goes. What matters is what we are trying to build here, what we are trying to prove. That a woman can run a ranch, that people who refuse to be owned can still build something worth having, that choosing your own path, even when it is hard, is worth the struggle." She turned to look at him in the moonlight. His face was half-shadowed, but she could see the determination in his eyes, the steadiness that had drawn her to him from the beginning. "I am falling in love with you," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I did not want to. I fought against it. But I am, and I thought you should know before tomorrow in case." He kissed her. It was soft and careful, asking rather than demanding. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to cup his face, feeling the roughness of his jaw beneath her palm. When they finally pulled apart, she was breathless. "I fell in love with you weeks ago," he said. "I have been waiting for you to catch up. You could have said something. You needed time. I was willing to give it. Even if I had never been ready, even then. Your feelings are yours to give or not give. I would not pressure you." She kissed him again, longer this time, letting herself feel everything she had been holding back. Fear and hope and desire and trust, all tangled together into something new and terrifying and wonderful. "When we get back," she said against his lips, "we should talk about what this means, about what we want our future to look like." "When we get back," he agreed. "For now, let us just focus on making sure we have a future to plan." They sat together until the first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky, then rose to prepare for the drive. The journey to Helena was every bit as difficult as Davina had anticipated. The cattle were ornery. The weather alternated between too hot and suddenly storming, and twice they had to detour around washed-out sections of trail. But Quentin proved to be an excellent trail hand, and they worked together with the seamless coordination of people who had learned to trust each other completely. On the fourth night, camped beside a creek with the herd settled for the night, Quentin said, "I have been thinking about your dream. About breeding quality cattle. What about it?" "There is a rancher in Wyoming who has been experimenting with crossbreeding Herefords with Longhorns, creating cattle that are hardy enough for the range but produce better beef. If we could get breeding stock from him, build a reputation for quality, we could charge premium prices." Davina had heard about such experiments but had dismissed them as beyond her reach. Now, looking at Quentin's earnest face in the firelight, she allowed herself to imagine it. "That would take years to establish, and money we do not have. It would take years. But if we can get through this crisis, if we can stabilize, maybe it is something to work toward, something that could set us apart. You really believe we can do this, not just survive but thrive?" "I believe that you are the most capable, determined person I have ever met. I believe that together we are stronger than either of us alone. And I believe that people who fight as hard as we have do not just survive. They build empires." She wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that the future could be as bright as he painted it. "Ask me again after the sale," she said. "When we know if we still have a ranch to dream about." They reached Helena 2 days later, dusty and exhausted but with all 31 head of cattle intact. The stockyards were busy with early season activity, and Davina felt a surge of hope. Surely among all these buyers, they could find someone willing to pay a fair price. But as they led the herd into the pens, she noticed something wrong. Buyers who had been examining other cattle suddenly turned away when they approached. A man she recognized from previous sales made eye contact, then quickly looked elsewhere. Fear gripped her stomach. "They have been warned off," she said to Quentin. "Foster got word here somehow." "We do not know that for certain. But after 2 hours of trying to attract buyers with no success, it became clear. Foster's influence reached even here. Davina felt despair threatening to overwhelm her. They had come so far, worked so hard, and it was going to fail anyway. She would lose the ranch, lose everything she had fought for. "Mrs. Wellesley," she turned to see an older man approaching, his clothes marking him as someone of means. He had been watching them for the past half hour but had not approached until now. "Yes. Name is Robert Fletcher. I own a meat packing operation out of Denver. I could not help but notice you are having difficulty attracting buyers." Her cheeks burned with humiliation. "Word travels, apparently." "It does. Jeremiah Foster sent telegrams to half the buyers in the territory warning them off your stock." He paused. "Thing is, I do not much care for Foster. We had dealings a few years back that left a sour taste. So when I heard he was working so hard to sabotage you, I got curious." Hope flickered. "Curious how?" "Curious about what kind of person threatens a powerful man so much that he would go to these lengths to destroy them. So I examined your cattle. They are good stock, healthy, well cared for, better than half of what I have seen here today." "Thank you, but I will give you top market price for the whole herd, and if you can deliver the same quality next year, I will contract with you for regular purchases." Davina stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because Foster needs to learn he cannot control every market in the West. And because I believe in supporting people who do quality work, regardless of whether they are men or women." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" She shook his hand, afraid to believe this was really happening. "We have a deal. The sale went through that afternoon." Fletcher paid in bank draft, enough to cover the mortgage payment with money left over for supplies and winter feed. As they rode away from Helena 2 days later, Davina felt like she could breathe for the first time in months. "We did it," she said wonderingly. "We actually did it." "You did it," Quentin corrected. "I just helped. We did it together. That matters." They camped that night under a sky full of stars, and for the first time since Davina could remember, the future seemed full of possibility rather than dread. "I have been thinking about what you said," Quentin told her as they lay side by side, not quite touching. "About talking about our future when we got back. I have been thinking about it too. What do you want, Davina? Not just for the ranch, but for your life, for us." She turned onto her side to face him. "I want what we have been building. A partnership where we both have a voice, both have power, both have choice. I want to keep building the ranch into something extraordinary. I want to wake up every morning excited about the work ahead. And us." He asked quietly. "What do you want there?" "I want you," she said simply. "I want to build a life together, not just a business. But I need you to understand that I will never be a traditional wife. I will never be content to hand over control or decision-making or my own identity. I do not want a traditional wife. I want a partner, an equal, someone who challenges me and pushes me and builds with me. Even if that means arguing sometimes, even if that means I dig in my heels on things that matter to me, especially then. I do not want agreement out of obligation. I want honest partnership even when it is difficult." She kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Love and gratitude and hope and determination all tangled together. "When we get home," she said, I want to get married, but on our terms, not society's. A partnership that we define ourselves. That sounds perfect. They held each other under the stars, two people who had chosen the difficult path and found each other along the way. The return journey felt shorter somehow, buoyed by success and plans for the future. They arrived back at the ranch on a warm June afternoon to find someone waiting on the porch. A woman Davina did not recognize stood as they rode up. She was perhaps 50, well-dressed, with kind eyes and an air of quiet authority. "Mrs. Wellesley," she asked. "I am Margaret Tanner." Davina glanced at Quentin and saw shock on his face. "Mother." "Hello, Quentin. It has been a long time." They dismounted slowly, and Davina watched the complicated emotions play across Quentin's face. Margaret studied her son with eyes that held both love and sadness. "How did you find me?" he asked. "I hired an investigator 2 years ago. I have known where you were, more or less, for some time, but your father insisted we respect your choice to leave. Recently, however, he had a scare with his heart and it changed his perspective on some things. Is he all right? He will be. But it made us both realize how much time we have wasted being stubborn, how much we have missed of your life." She looked at Davina. "And how much you have built without us." "How much do you know?" Quentin asked. "Enough to know that you have found something worth building. Something that matters to you." She paused. "I am not here to ask you to come home, Quentin. I am here to tell you that we were wrong to try to force you into a life you did not want, and to tell you that if you want a relationship with us, we would like that very much." Quentin seemed frozen, unable to respond. Davina stepped forward. "Mrs. Tanner, I am Davina Wellesley. Your son and I are partners in this ranch. He has been invaluable to me, not just as a worker but as a friend," and she glanced at Quentin. "And as the man I plan to marry." Margaret's eyes warmed. "Then I am very pleased to meet you, Miss Wellesley. Please call me Davina. And would you like to stay for supper? We have much to discuss, but perhaps we could start with a meal." Over supper, the years of silence slowly began to bridge. Margaret asked about the ranch, about their plans, about how they met. She listened when Quentin explained why he had left, really listened without defending or arguing. And she shared stories about the family, about Quentin's younger sister who had married and had children, about his father slowly learning to let go of control. "He wants to see you," she said finally. "Not to change your mind or convince you to return, just to see you, to know you are well." "I do not know if I am ready for that," Quentin admitted. "That is fair, but know that the door is open when you are." Before she left the next morning, Margaret pulled Davina aside. "Take care of my son. He has always been too willing to sacrifice his own needs for others." "I think he might say the same about me," Davina replied. "Then you are well matched," she smiled. "And for what it is worth, I am glad he found you. Glad he found a life that makes him happy." After Margaret left, Quentin was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I did not expect that." "Any of that? Are you glad she came?" "I think so. It is complicated. Families usually are." He pulled her close. "I am glad you are going to be my family. That is not complicated at all." They were married in late July, a small ceremony in front of the fireplace in their cabin. Sheriff Donovan officiated, and Margaret returned with Quentin's younger sister Emma for the occasion. They had invited no one from town, wanting the day to be about them rather than about society's expectations. Davina wore a simple blue dress and flowers in her hair. Quentin wore his best shirt and a nervous smile. When they spoke their vows, they promised partnership, respect, and honest communication. They promised to build together, to dream together, to face whatever came as equals. "I promise to never make decisions without you," Quentin said. "To never take your voice or your choice or your independence for granted." "I promise to let you in," Davina replied. to trust you with my fears as well as my dreams, to build a life with you, not just beside you." When Sheriff Donovan pronounced them married, Quentin kissed her like it was the first time and the 1,000th time all at once. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Emma was delighted to have a new sister and peppered Davina with questions about ranch life. Margaret watched her son with tears in her eyes, clearly grateful to have him back in her life, even if not in the way she had once hoped. "Your father wants you to know that he is proud of you," Margaret told Quentin before they left. "He may not understand your choices, but he respects that you had the courage to make them." "Tell him I would like him to visit," Quentin said. "When he is well enough to travel, I want him to see what we are building here. He will like that." After the guests left, Davina and Quentin stood on their porch watching the sun set over their land. Their land now, legally and emotionally. "How does it feel to be Davina Tanner?" he asked. "It feels like being Davina Wellesley, but with a partner." She corrected herself. "Actually, I think I will keep Wellesley professionally, for the ranch. It is the name that is on all the documents, the name that people know." "That makes sense. Does it bother you?" "Not at all. You built this place as Davina Wellesley. That name has meaning, power. I would never ask you to give that up." She kissed him. "Have I mentioned lately that I made a very good choice?" "Not in the last hour or so." "Well, I did. The best choice." Their first months as a married couple settled into a comfortable rhythm. They worked side by side during the day, building the ranch into something better with each week that passed. They used some of the profits from the cattle sale to buy breeding stock from the Wyoming rancher Quentin had mentioned. They mended relationships with some of the townspeople who had been caught in Foster's web of manipulation. Jeremiah Foster himself left Ukiah that fall, his business interests having suffered after word spread about his treatment of Davina. Apparently, Robert Fletcher had told his story to other buyers and ranchers, and Foster's reputation took a hit he could not recover from. The new bank manager was far more interested in ethical business practices than in power games. Silas Crawford sold the bank and moved to California, and the mortgage was transferred to a bank in Helena that had no personal interest in seeing them fail. In October, Quentin's father visited. Richard Tanner was a stern man, formal and uncomfortable in the rough setting of a Montana ranch. But he watched his son work with the cattle, listened as Quentin explained their breeding program and business plan, and toured the property with something that might have been respect growing in his eyes. "You have built something substantial here," he told them over dinner on his last night. "I will not pretend I understand why you left Boston, Quentin. I spent years angry about it, but I can see now that you have found your place, your purpose." "Thank you, Father. That means more than you know. Your mother was right to push me to come. I would have died with this rift between us, and it would have been my own stubborn pride that caused it." He looked at Davina. "Take care of my boy. He always had more heart than sense." "I could say the same about him taking care of me," Davina replied with a smile. Richard actually laughed at that. "Then you are indeed well matched." As winter approached, Davina realized she was pregnant. She had mixed feelings about it, worry that a child would limit her ability to work, but also a deep joy at the thought of building a family with Quentin. "What if I cannot do both?" she asked him one night. "What if having a baby means I have to give up the ranch?" "Why would it mean that?" "Because babies require constant care. Because society expects mothers to focus solely on children. Because society has a lot of stupid expectations," he interrupted gently. "But we have never let that stop us before. We will figure it out together just like we figure everything else out." "You say that like it is simple." "It is not simple, but it is possible. Women all over the frontier raise children and work ranches. We will find our way." She wanted to believe him, but the fear lingered. She had fought so hard for her independence, her agency, her right to build something of her own. What if motherhood took that away? But as the months passed and her belly grew, something shifted. She realized that having a child did not mean giving up her identity. It meant expanding it. She could be a mother and a rancher and a businesswoman. It would be hard, but hard did not mean impossible. Quentin was true to his word. As her pregnancy progressed, he took on more of the heavy work without making her feel diminished. He asked how she was feeling rather than telling her what she should do. He built a cradle in the barn during his evening hours, his hands careful and skilled as he shaped the wood. "I want our child to grow up knowing both parents," he said one night. "Not just you or just me, but both of us. Equally involved, equally present. That is not how most families work. Most families are not us." Their daughter was born in April of 1879, on a morning when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom across the valley. The labor was long and difficult, but when Davina finally held the tiny red-faced infant in her arms, she felt something click into place. "She is perfect," Quentin whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You are both perfect." They named her Clara after Quentin's grandmother. Clara Margaret Tanner came into the world squalling and red-faced and absolutely determined, much like her mother. The first months were exhausting. Davina had prepared herself for sleepless nights and constant demands, but the reality was still overwhelming. There were moments when she wanted to scream with frustration, when she missed the simplicity of her old life. But there were also moments of transcendent joy. Clara's first smile. The way she gripped Davina's finger with surprising strength. The look on Quentin's face when he sang to his daughter, his voice soft and wondering. And Quentin was an equal partner in everything. He changed diapers and walked the floor with a crying baby and never once treated childcare as something beneath him or exclusively Davina's domain. When Clara was 3 months old and Davina wanted to ride out to check on the herd, he stayed home with the baby without complaint. "Go," he said. "You need to do the work that feeds your soul, not just the work that feeds our family." She kissed him gratefully and spent the afternoon on horseback, feeling like herself again. They found a rhythm, trading off responsibilities, supporting each other, building their family and their business simultaneously. It was exhausting and wonderful and nothing like what Davina had been taught family should look like. It was better. By the time Clara was a year old, the ranch had tripled in size. Their breeding program was gaining a reputation, and buyers came from as far as Colorado to purchase their stock. Robert Fletcher had been true to his word, giving them regular contracts that provided stable income. Davina hired 2 ranch hands to help with the growing operation, carefully selecting men who understood she was the boss and treated her accordingly. With the extra help, she and Quentin could focus on the breeding program and business development while still having time for their family. On Clara's first birthday, they threw a party that included half the town. The people of Ukiah had slowly come to respect Davina's success, and many of the women found inspiration in her example. She had received letters from young women across Montana asking for advice on running businesses, on maintaining independence, on building lives on their own terms. "You have become a symbol," Quentin told her one evening. "Whether you wanted to or not. I just wanted to keep my ranch." "You kept your ranch, built an empire, proved that a woman could succeed in a man's world. That is more than just keeping property." She leaned against him, watching Clara toddle around the porch chasing a patient barn cat. "We did it together, that matters. It does. But you were the one brave enough to refuse every suitor, to stand alone against the pressure. You were the one who knew what you wanted and refused to settle for less. And you were the one who asked what I wanted instead of telling me what you could give me. That changed everything." He kissed her temple. "We changed everything. Together." 2 years later, they had a son. James Quentin Tanner was born on a snowy December morning, arriving 3 weeks early and in a hurry, much like his father. He had Davina's dark hair and Quentin's steady eyes, and from the first moment, he was completely different from his sister. Where Clara was bold and boisterous, James was quiet and observant. "They are going to balance each other perfectly," Quentin predicted, and he was right. The ranch continued to thrive. By 1883, they had 300 head of cattle, 5 ranch hands, and a reputation that extended throughout the Montana Territory. Davina had started breeding horses as well, partnering with a Salish woman named Mary, who taught her indigenous methods of horse training that were far more effective than traditional techniques. Richard Tanner visited every year, his pride in his son's accomplishments growing with each visit. He and Davina developed a warm relationship built on mutual respect. Margaret became a beloved grandmother, visiting twice a year and spoiling the children appropriately. Emma moved to Montana with her husband in 1884, settling on a nearby ranch. Having family close by enriched their lives in ways Davina had not anticipated. The children had cousins to play with, and she and Emma became close friends. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Quentin surprised her with a gift. He led her to the barn where a new sign hung over the door. Wellesley Tanner Ranch, established 1878. "You remembered," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "Of course I remembered. This place started with your name, your dream, your refusal to give up. It should always carry that with it. It is our place now, our dream. Built on the foundation you created. That matters." She kissed him there in the barn, surrounded by the life they had built together. 2 people who had refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on them. 2 people who had chosen the difficult path of true partnership. 10 years after Quentin first rode up to her ranch, they stood together on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Clara was 9 now, already talking about becoming a rancher like her mother. James was 7, quieter but with an uncanny ability to handle horses. "You ever miss it?" Quentin asked. "The simplicity of being alone, making all your own decisions without having to consider anyone else." Davina thought about it seriously. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity, but I do not miss the loneliness. I do not miss the weight of carrying everything alone. And I definitely do not miss the version of myself who was so afraid of vulnerability that she almost pushed away the best thing that ever happened to her." "You were not afraid. You were protecting yourself. There is a difference, maybe, but I am glad I let you in, glad I took the risk." "So am I." They had built something extraordinary together, not just a successful ranch, though it was that, not just a loving family, though they had that too. They had built a partnership based on respect, equality, and genuine care. They had proven that it was possible to maintain independence while building interdependence, that you could be strong alone and stronger together. More suitors had come over the years, men who thought perhaps now that she was settled and successful, she might reconsider. She turned them all down with the same calm certainty she had always possessed. Not because she was damaged or difficult or any of the other things people had said about her, but because she had exactly what she wanted, a partnership that honored both people, a love built on respect, a life chosen rather than accepted. On a warm summer evening in 1888, Davina stood in the field watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Quentin came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About that first day you showed up asking for work, about how close I came to sending you away like all the others. What stopped you? You asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what you could provide. No one had ever done that before. And what do you want now?" He asked softly, echoing that transformative question from a decade earlier. She turned in his arms to face him. "This. Everything we have built, everything we are building, everything we will build tomorrow and the next day and all the days after that. That sounds perfect to me." He kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. In the distance, they could hear their children laughing, the cattle lowing, the sounds of a thriving ranch. Their ranch, their dream, their life. Built together by two people who had refused to settle for anything less than true partnership. Two people who had chosen the difficult path and found that difficulty was worth it when you walked it with the right person. Years continued to pass in the comfortable rhythm they had established. The ranch grew and prospered. The children grew into capable young adults who understood the value of hard work and the importance of respecting others' autonomy. Clara did indeed become a rancher, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day operations. James became a veterinarian, the first in the region, and worked with ranchers throughout Montana Territory, helping them improve their stock. Davina and Quentin grew older together, their love deepening with each year. They still argued sometimes, both too stubborn to always agree, but they had learned to fight fair and listen well. They still made major decisions together, neither assuming the right to act without the other's input. They added a third child to their family when Davina was 34, a surprise baby girl they named Margaret after Quentin's mother. She was wild and free-spirited, riding before she could walk properly, and absolutely determined to do everything her own way. "She is just like you," Quentin told Davina with a laugh when Margaret, at age 4, announced she was going to be president someday. "She is just like both of us," Davina corrected. "Stubborn and certain and unwilling to let anyone else define her limits." They celebrated Montana statehood in 1889 with a huge party on the ranch. The Wellesley Tanner spread had become a landmark in the region, known for quality stock, ethical practices, and the unusual but effective partnership between its owners. Young couples sometimes came to ask their advice on building equal marriages. Women came to ask how Davina had maintained her business while raising children. Men came to ask Quentin how he could stand to share power with his wife. "Power shared is not power lost," he would always reply. "It is power multiplied." On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, their children threw them a party that included seemingly everyone they had ever known. People came from all over Montana and beyond. Robert Fletcher, now retired but still a friend, gave a toast about the first time he met them and how he knew even then that they were something special. "They did not just build a ranch," he said. "They built a model for how partnerships should work, how love should work, how respect and equality can create something stronger than either dominance or submission ever could." As the evening wound down and the guests departed, Davina and Quentin found themselves alone on their porch once again, just as they had been so many times over the years. They were older now, both in their 40s, with gray threading through their hair and lines earned from years of hard work and laughter. 20 years, Davina said wonderingly. "It feels like yesterday and forever ago all at once." "Do you have any regrets?" Quentin asked. "Not a single one." "You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner. Think of all the years we could have had together." "We had the years we needed. I was not ready for you before that. I needed to learn who I was alone before I could truly share my life with someone." He took her hand, their fingers interlacing with the easy familiarity of decades. "Thank you for refusing every suitor who came before me. Thank you for being the one who asked the right question." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The ranch was quiet around them, everyone settled for the night. Their children were grown or nearly so, their cattle were thriving, and their legacy was secure. But more than that, they had built a love that honored both of them, a partnership that made both stronger, a life that proved it was possible to maintain your independence while choosing interdependence. "What do you want?" Quentin asked softly, repeating the question that had changed both their lives. Davina smiled. "More of this. More years with you, more sunsets on this porch. More mornings working side by side. More of everything we have built together." "That sounds perfect," he said, and kissed her beneath the Montana stars. They had started as a widow who refused to compromise and a cowboy who knew to ask instead of assume. They had become partners who built an empire together. They had proven that true love was not about one person consuming the other, but about two people choosing to build something neither could create alone. And they had done it all by starting with one simple, transformative question. "What do you want?" The answer had changed everything.